All right. And I am going to remove myself from the stage, and I'm going to, Ms. Slocum, put you on full screen. And Dr. White, I will leave it to you.
Okay, yeah, I'm fine. I can hear. All right, I can get started now.
Yep, go for it. When we get, yep, you can get started.
Okay, all right. Okay, Miss Slocum, can you state your full name?
My name is Marsha Marie Sullins Slocum.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about your upbringing. Tell us about uh, how you grew up and what it was like growing up in your time and in your experience.
Well, I'm from Tuskegee, Alabama, and Tuskegee was is a majority black population. Very when I was growing up, very professional. We had the university at that time, Tuskegee Institute, and the VA hospital, and most of the adults worked in some capacity at one of those facilities. We Everything was centered around in the black community. Everything was centered around the university and VA. Um, we were in a I would say, a very protective environment because of that. And uh, our communities were segregated to the extent that the university area had a separate zip code than the downtown area, which I would describe as the white area. Where I lived was my house was located behind the National Guard Armory on Highway 82, going what we also called it Notasulga Road. And interestingly, that road was kind of like a line of demarcation with what at that time we were not African Americans or black. We were called Negroes, and the Negro population lived on one side of Highway 82, and just at the top of my street, on the other side of the street, was the white community, so to speak. And so that was kind of the way it was all around one side of downtown Tuskegee, near uh, the white high school, Tuskegee High School. Behind that school was the Board of Education, and just beyond that was a park, which we call the White Park, um, and that had a swimming pool. So that just past that swimming pool in that park, right by the Lake of Tuskegee, was another line that park was kind of another line of demarcation. So just on the other side of that was another community of black African Americans who lived along the lake. So that's kind of, I'm telling you this to give you kind of an idea of how our communities were divided.
And
Um,
did you have like a consciousness that things were divided into black and white? Was that Did you have
oh,
discussions
yes.
at home about that? What were some of those discussions?
Well, we really didn't have uh, discussions, so to speak. It was just the way of life. Um, Now we 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 had. I have to say that, I'm not trying to say that we were. Yeah, well, yeah, my parents were probably better off than some of the white kids that lived at the top of the street.
Hmm.
So, we had more things to play with, and sometimes we would play out in the field right by the National Guard Armory, and some of the white kids would come down and play with us because they wanted to play with our toys.
Okay. And so, um, how do we come to your participation in Levy Macon?
That was all my parents.
Okay. Okay.
At the time, in 1963, I was 13 years old. So, I was still a child, um, so to speak. But prior to the that um, litigation, my parents were, particularly my mother, was very active with what the Civic Association, Tuskegee Civic Association,
Hmm.
and so I was around their activity a lot. And um, even before the 1960s and the late 1950s, the Tuskegee Civic Association um, led a boycott of the white merchants in Tuskegee. And I was, I say I participated in that I was up there at the in the office helping them out. My job was to fold letters and to seal the letters. We one thing I remember doing, and again, I'm speaking from a child's perspective.
Okay.
They would have there was a sponge in a little bowl. And so, we're all used to taking an envelope and licking it, but that was apropos. I was not supposed to do that. So I do remember taking the envelopes and sealing them, running it across the sponge with the water in it to seal them. So yeah, I would say in that respect, I was involved in that process, and I at the same time I do remember um, a lot a lot of what they called mass meetings. I don't know if uh, people are familiar with that, but um, during the time of civil rights and that was around the same time of Rosa Parks. Um, there were a lot of civil rights leaders that came to various churches that spoke about awareness of our rights as a people. And even though I was young, it was for me. It was boring. It was long. The meetings usually started around 7 o'clock in the evening, and they lasted till at least 11 o'clock, 10 or 11 o'clock. And I don't remember Martin Luther King Jr., but I have heard that he spoke at some of the meetings that I know that I was at. But again, I was young, so it was that part of who was speaking wasn't really important to me.
And so, with uh, were your parents um, activists, or did they? What was their disposition when it was time for the lawsuit to be filed? Did you hear a lot of conversations about the lawsuit? Was
I
it something
I
that you were
didn't.
prepared for, or
Um, as far as the lawsuit was concerned, we didn't have a whole lot of discussions about it. I do know that my parents did tell us that we were named plaintiffs in the lawsuit, and that they were representing us as their parents. And we talked about why why they were doing this, and what they pressed upon us was, I mean, we always grew up. We grew up. Um, what we our books that we got at our school were hand me downs from the white school. It was obvious they had already been used, and there was marks in them and things like that. So we never really got brand new books and things like that. And so that's as a child, as I remember. that's how my mother pressed upon me the importance of it, that they wanted us to get the best education. They weren't saying that the white school had a better education, offered a better education, but they wanted us to have the opportunity to get the best education that was possible. And in doing that, that meant that we had to have the opportunity to go to any school that was available to us. So that's how they
So was
approached it.
so for the record, can you tell us your parents' names?
My parents were Palmer Sullins. My father was Palmer Sullins Sr., my mother Della Sullins, Palmer and Della Sullins. My mother's role at the Tuskegee Civic Association, she served at one point as the membership chair, um, and in increasing members of that association.
Okay. So what was your reaction when they told you that you would be a part of the lawsuit?
I was I was fine with it. Um, and my brothers were also uh, included, and they were okay with it. They were fine with the lawsuit, but when it came time to going to the school, I later found out that they did not want to. I was different, and my attitude was that I would do anything to please my parents. And so if that's what they wanted, I saw how important it was to them. So I wanted to do my best.
And so was there any harassment from whites once the lawsuit was filed, or did your parents have any kind of backlash as a result of their activism?
My parents didn't have it, not immediately. I mean, we did not have any immediate backlash. When the lawsuit was filed, um, there was obviously resistance, but I never saw any violence or experienced any backlash at that point, not before school started.
Okay. And what happened in your life personally that pretty much was the turning point to where you kind of understood the racial dynamic? Was there something that happened, say, like in a store or on the street, or something that happened that kind of that you remember as being that defining moment for you to where you understood that racism needed to change?
Oh, there were instances. The movie theater that we went to downtown was segregated. The we sat upstairs, and the white people sat downstairs. Um, I never, it never made any sense to me because we were watching the same movie. Um, but I did realize that the concessions snacks that they had offered were different from what was offered to us, um, and, and things like that. Um, there's one instance um, that stands out in growing up as a child that really um, made me aware. You know, I mentioned that some of the white kids would come down and play with us, and we were fine with that. We would play army and things. I was kind of a tomboy, and
Okay.
so we would play army and things like that together. And um, I think the boy's name, the white boy who lived at the top of the street, I think his name was uh, Jimmy Joe or something like that. And he was always excited to come and play with us. But his sister, who was much older than him, was very prejudiced, and she would say things um, that call us names. And then one day, as we got older, we got Jimmy Joe all of a sudden called us. He didn't call us the N word like his sister did, but he lashed out and he was like, "You're just chocolate milk." So um, yeah, that was a defining moment for me, and awareness that because of the change in his attitude. And then I remember another instance after I didn't mention. Yeah, I didn't mention the boycott. After we boycotted uh, the merchants in Tuskegee, we would go to shopping in Montgomery. That was the primary place where we went to get our groceries and things. And one of my friends, was very fair with light bluish gray eyes, and we were walking down the street, and he's a black. He's black, but a group of white people, and these were all adults, thought he was white and that he was associating with us. And they walked up, and one of the men spit on his shoes and called him a nigger lover.
Okay. And what was your response to that?
Well, I was shocked. I didn't say anything. I was shocked. But later, we talked about it. Um, but I wasn't raised to be violent or reactive like that. So we just walked away.
Okay. So the lawsuit is filed, hearings are held. What were your thoughts as the lawsuit progressed?
I didn't really have any initial thoughts until one day my parents, um, I think it was on a Saturday. Yeah, it was a Saturday. Um, my mother woke us up, me and my brothers. It was three of us. I had two brothers, and they woke the three of us up and told us that we were going to be going down to the Board of Education uh, to take a test, and that the test they would base on the test. The purpose of the test was um, to kind of weed out who would be attending um, the act- actually participating actively participating in the desegregation of Tuskegee High School. So for again, that was one of those times where my brothers, it became a reality to them that meant that they would be going to a different school than the Tuskegee Institute High School, where that was majority or all Negro population, and that's where they really wanted to go. I was still going to the private Chambliss Children's House. Um, so um, again, I was 13 and it wasn't as significant. My oldest brother was a senior in high school, so he really wanted to graduate with his regular class, his existing class, and not have to transfer to another school. So he was totally uninterested. But that same day, that Saturday, we got ready, and my parents drove us to the Board of Education, and there were a lot of us Negro students there. I'm not going to really say an exact number, but in my 13-year-old child mind, it looked like at least 100 uh, black students there to take the test. And we were all in one room, We weren't divided by grade or age or anything, so they gave us a standardized achievement test, and we all took the same test. So that is what the Board of Education had decided to be the determination of who they would select. Now, later on, when my mother told me that I had been selected, um, I she said that the explanation that they were given was that the board had determined how many students were going to be in each grade level, and they took the highest scores, the students that made the highest scores in each grade level. Um, at that point, it was 13. They chose 13 students, and there were two of us in the eighth grade. In the ninth grade, I think it was four. In the 10th grade, there were three. 11th grade, there was one. And the 12th grade, they chose three.
And what was your 13-year-old impression of Attorney Fred Gray?
I I thought he was brilliant. I thought he was really smart, and he was really Johnny on the spot. He moved really fast and getting us in and out of court and moving things along. Now, again, I didn't really know uh, the details of what was going on, um, but I thought he was a very, very smart man.
So did you have to take a stand and testify, or were you questioned in any way?
Yes. Um, well, um, there it's kind of that's kind of out of order of one of the things that I wanted to share. Um, but yes, I did when we went to um, the school in Tuskegee. uh, Tuskegee High School was when we did integrate the school. Um, on the day, let me back up because I need to keep these kind of in order, and I will get to the part about testifying. Um, but on the very first day of school at Tuskegee High School, which was school always started the day after Labor Day, so I think that would have been September 3rd of 1963. That day, after we were selected, the 13 of us were selected. We were taken from the Board of Education on the bus, which to me, as a child, that seemed really stupid to put us on a bus to go one block to the school. Um, but we got on the school bus, and when we got to the school, um, there were some state troopers got on the bus and read an executive order that the governor of Alabama, George Wallace, had um, filed an executive order that we would not be allowed to go in the school. So um, we didn't get off the bus. I could see white students through the windows looking out. Um, and there were a lot of state troopers and horseback troopers around the school blocking them off, and there were a lot of people um, who were yelling and screaming, and a few were yelling and screaming, but a lot of them were adults who just were looking on. But we got on the bus and they took us back to the Board of Education. That's Fred. I know that Fred Gray. They went back to court with Judge Frank Johnson, and Judge Johnson made the decision um, that the ruling that George Wallace could not interfere with the desegregation of the schools. So on September 9th, we board. This time we didn't board the bus at the school, at the Board of Education. The school bus picked us up at our homes and drove us to school as a regular school day. But when we got to school on that day, September 9th, there were just a handful of white students there, maybe about 10 or 15. The other students had left, and a lot of the majority of the white teachers had left. But that particular day, there is a photo I remember seeing of me and Eddie Matthews walking to the school, and there were two police officers looking on. Um, but when we got into the school, like I said, there were just a handful of white students that were there. And that was the beginning of an exodus. Within another week, all of the white students were gone. And I recall that some of the remaining white teachers, well, I would hear that they did not feel that we would be able to keep up. Some of them wanted us there. Some of them, did not. But I do remember that our math teacher, Shirley Chambliss, and I were in the eighth grade, and our math teacher would say things like calling us Yankees because we didn't talk with Southern drawls, and we didn't call her say yes, ma'am to her. We would say, yes, Miss Ponder, and she thought that we were being rude. And so there were rumors that some of the teachers wanted to uh, do things that they to get us put out of school. And one teacher, was successful because I mentioned that the young man, Eddie Matthews, who was walking to school with me, within 2 weeks of school at Tuskegee High School, he was expelled from the school for what they said was either insubordination or misconduct. But Eddie, who is no longer with us, I remember Eddie telling me, we were neighbors. He said that he was walking down the hall with Helois Billis, and he was talking about his mother. And one of the white teachers was standing at the doorway of her classroom, and that she accused him of calling her an MF. You know, but he said he just said the word mother, and he was talking about his mother. But there, at that point, the school did not ask for witnesses, so that was. I didn't actually see it anyway, so I couldn't have been a witness for it. But they didn't, they just expelled him without doing any investigation whether that was true or not. So that left us with 12 students. And then um, we, from that point, we just had classes every day without any really significant incidences at all. Throughout October, I recall in November um, that was when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. And I do remember on that day they had a television in the home economics classroom, and I remembered that uh, they allowed us, or they invited us to come to their home ec room and watch it on television. There were no more classes, but of course, um, buses were not running, so we couldn't go home until actual end of day at school. but that was a sad time. But at the same time, it was memorable that we were all together, the teachers and the 12 of remaining 12 black students were all in that room in a sad, uh, momentous time. President Kennedy was very, very important to us in our lives and very instrumental in what we were going through at that particular time. But we went on through, finished that semester, and went, uh, left school for the Christmas holidays. And when we um, came back to school after New Year's, we were there at school for a couple of weeks, and then one day at the end, near the end of January, we I, I got to school, and um, there was padlock padlocks on the doors, and there really, there were police there, but it was unlike the very first day of school where there were so many state troopers and things there. That wasn't the case on that day in January. Just the school was locked. The principal, Mr. Wadsworth, was there, and he just said that George Wallace had and the state board of education had decided that it was not economically feasible for the school to remain open for just 12 students. So that led to the first time that I entered the courtroom in Montgomery at the federal courthouse, and saw Judge Frank Johnson for the first time, because I went to court with my mother. Um, Fred Gray and his team um, had filed a motion for the student requesting from the court for the 12 of us to be allowed to go to the other white public schools, just like the white students who had boycotted Tuskegee High School. And the other two schools were Shorter High School in Shorter, Alabama, and Macon County High in Notasulga, Alabama. Um, the other option, which is what the Macon County Board of Education was asking for, was that we just go back to Tuskegee Institute High School or the other Negro schools, um, and just call it a day, basically. Judge Johnson ruled that we would be divided into six, and six go to Shorter, and six go to Notasulga. Um, I was with the group that went to Notasulga. That was Shirley Chambliss and myself, the two eighth graders. Patty Jones, she was the lone 11th grader, and Willie B. Wyatt, Anthony Lee, and Robert Judkins. They were the three seniors. Those are the six in my group that went to Notasulga. Um, we went to Notasulga on, I think it was around the first week of February, around February 4th or 5th. We boarded the bus, the school bus at the Board of Education in Tuskegee, Alabama, and headed to Notasulga. I think it was about 20 miles away, 15 or 20 miles away, maybe not that far. But I remember that the school bus was surrounded by federal marshal cars with federal marshals in them. I was very familiar with the federal marshals because they had, you know, in the evening, they were present around my house. So anytime that we would leave the house, they would surround our car and go wherever we went. Um, but that particular day on the school bus, a freelance photographer was when we got on the bus. He was hiding on the floor in the bus. There were six of us, and so we each sat on a seat, um, three on one side and three on the other. And I was on the right side of the bus, or left side if you actually got on the bus, on the third row. Um, I remember the photographer crawling around on the floor and taking pictures, and he introduced himself. At that time, I didn't remember what he said his name was, but I do recall that um, he said that he was a freelance photographer and that he was on an assignment for Life magazine. He took a lot of pictures. He really didn't ask a lot of questions other than introducing himself. So as we entered the town of Notasulga, this it was a very small town, maybe a couple of stores and uh, the volunteer fire department with one fire truck, and there was a police station. But on that day, the street the street in that downtown was filled with white people lined up along the street, just shouting profane words, and um, some of them had guns, but they were just pointing the guns at the bus. And I thought, how in the world, again, a child, I'm like, why are these? This is a police station right there. Why are they letting them do this? But they didn't physically assault the bus or do anything. We just drove through. So the other thought that I had was, you know, this is a parade for us. Um, so we maybe about from the downtown area to the school was maybe another half mile. And when we got to the school, that's when the incident happened that um, was very frightening. And the school at Macon County High School had a semicircular drive, and at the foot of the semicircular drive, some deputized, there were state troopers and some uh, deputies and some deputized citizens who stopped the bus. And and when the officers got on the bus, and they obviously had been alerted that the photographer, who I later found learned that his name was Vernon Merritt III from Birmingham. They had obviously been alerted that he was on the bus, and they stopped the bus and got on and had cattle prod and billy clubs, and they were beating him. And I had never heard a man cry and scream like that before. And I being on the third row, they actually had thrown him against my back, and um, yeah, all I could do was just cover my head. I just didn't know what was going to happen. But they threw him off the bus. They had smashed his camera. They actually entered the front door, but then while they were beating him, someone else opened the back door. They didn't really enter the back door. They just opened it, but they threw him out the front door of the bus. Now, I do say that he the photographer was apparent. He was aware that something may happen to him. So before we had gotten to the school, he did take the roll of film out of his camera, and he stuck down in his sock. But after they threw him off the bus, then the policeman told the bus driver to drive on. So the bus driver drove on up into the semicircle in front of the school. That's when the mayor of Notasulga, James Ray, got on the bus, and he uh, informed us that there was a new ordinance that would preventing him from allowing us to enter the school, because the school was currently at capacity, and to allow an additional 6 students into the school would be a fire hazard. And he ordered the bus driver to leave. And again, at this time, unlike at Tuskegee High School, on that first day in September, well, on the 9th, yeah, that first day in September, where the students were basically just looking out the window. There in Notasulga, the students were hanging out of the window, upstairs and downstairs, and uh, when the bus started pulling off, they just cheering. Um, but we returned back to Tuskegee to the Board of Education on that day, and the 6 of us, um, the Assistant Attorney General John Doerr, who was very active um, uh, in the case. I think he was representing the United States as a plaintiff in the case, and worked very closely with Attorney Fred Gray. Um, John Doerr interviewed the 6 of us, not collectively but individually, to get our um, perspective on what had happened. And um, he selected me based on my memory, I guess, based on my memory of what had happened. He selected me to be a witness and at trial, at court. So the following week, and that's another reason that I said that I was so impressed with Fred Gray and his team, because they moved really fast. Um, and for us to be back in court so quickly. But because of the locale of Notasulga, this court case was held in Opelika, at the federal court in Opelika, but it was still presided. It was still in the district of Judge Frank Johnson. So Judge Johnson was still presiding over that proceedings. Um, but on I had met several times prior to that incident with John Doerr. And so I was really familiar with him. He used to like to come to our house in the evening because he liked to eat. And my mother would always feed him. So he would find a reason to come by. So I was familiar with him. And I thought he was probably the nicest white person I had ever met. And then being young, he was handsome. I thought he was handsome. So I kind of, yeah, I had a little crush on him too. Uh, so
Ms. Slocum,
um,
let me ask you a question. So what was your impression of Judge Frank Johnson?
I'm going to get to that. Um, no, um, just when we went to court, well, um, John Doerr had after selecting me to be a witness, he informed me that he would go over and prepare me for testifying. And he had said that I might get approached um, by reporters, but not to say anything. We were not to say anything. So in Opelika, when we went to court, Um, there, um, when we got to court that day, John Doerr had me in what was considered, or I guess I call it a witness room, and he went over. He didn't go over the exact questions that he was going to ask me, but he just was preparing me for the types of questions that he would ask. But he did tell me that now the other side may not be that as nice as I am, but don't let them intimidate you. If you feel nervous, just look at me. So when I did, it was time for me to testify. When I did go in on the stand, that was my second time seeing Judge Frank Johnson, and I thought that he was very polite. He smiled, which put me, at ease. Again, as a child. At this point, no, I was still 13. I hadn't had my birthday yet. Um, but Frank, John Doe, um, examined me first, and things went very much like we had talked about and communicated in our prep. And I was fine with it. But then when the opposing counsel, when it was their time, it was totally the opposite. They were very harsh. They yelled. They cut me off, and when I was trying to answer, and um, that's when Judge Johnson stepped in. Judge Johnson, he just yelled. He was like, "Stop it! Stop it! This is a child. This is a child, and I expect you to treat her as a child and respect her." And and then he turned to me and he said, "I'll ask you the questions." And he did. He asked me. He didn't allow the other attorney to cross examine me any further. And I don't remember the exact questions. I just remember that he was so kind and gentle, and that he did everything to make me feel more comfortable. Um, to I really I didn't cry or anything like that, but it was obvious that I was upset and distraught. So at that point, to me, Judge Johnson was my hero of the day. Um, and again, that's from a 13-year-old perspective.
So after the trial, what was your life like in the post Levy Macon era? Did the conditions change, or was it just the beginning of another phase of Jim Crowism in Macon County?
Um, Things began to change. The After that testimony in Opelika, Judge Johnson ruled that the six of us would go back to the school in Notasulga and be admitted. So that's what we did the next week after that trial, after that court proceeding. And every day that we came to school, um, and initially the federal marshals would still follow the bus every day, but then it would started to trickle off. But my father, Palmer Sullins, would follow the bus to school every day. And every day that we would enter that small town in Notasulga, there would be white citizens out with signs and guns and shouting profanity as we went through the town and we headed to the schools. That was became kind of a typical day, but as the weeks went by, their presence, while it was still there, there were became fewer and fewer of them out there. Again, that was always, they had somebody had a gun, and it was always right there in front of the police station and the fire department. Um, but on some days when we approached the school, some days there would be graffiti and racial slurs written, painted on the school, uh, and some days there would be uh, uh, dolls made out of sackcloth and with nooses hung around their necks. And I mean, they really took the time to make these halos out of um, clovers, flowers made out of, and these halos going around the dolls' heads, and they would have them hanging over the doorway to where we entered the high school. Um, but the principal of the school, Mr. Clemens, he was another of the few very nice white people in authority in my life at that particular time, who would have somebody, although it didn't happen every week. The school wasn't uh, uh, painted, wasn't uh, graffiti wasn't painted on there every day, but on those days that it did, he would just have somebody come and whitewash the school. Again, the school was divided where there was this elementary section, um, auditorium, and the high school section, and there was a breezeway between each section of the school. On some days when we had class in the high school section, I do remember a couple of times there was a street that ran down the side of the high school section. I remember a couple of times somebody would drive down the street calling out profanity, racial slurs, and throwing firecrackers, setting off firecrackers in the yard. But they didn't hang around; they just drove by and did that. That wasn't the first couple of times. It was kind of frightening just hearing the firecrackers go off because you didn't know whether that was a gun, somebody shooting, or not. But then it just became just a regular thing. Um, but then in April of that year, in 1964, um, I think it was on a Friday. I think it was April 17th. Yeah, it was April 17th. That was the last day that the school, there was graffiti out. We came to school and there was graffiti all over the school. Um, and another day, the same day, Mr. Clements would have had somebody come in and paint the school. But that night, after school, late that night, early Saturday morning on April 18th, I remember that very well because my birthday. That was my birthday weekend, and my mother woke me up early Sunday morning, um, no, early Saturday morning, saying that the high school in Notasoga, had burned down. And it was very obvious, even to me, that a 13-year-old, very soon to be 14, uh, it was very obvious that that was probably arson. And interestingly, the as I mentioned, there were the three buildings there. Interestingly, the fire departments, they saved the auditorium and the elementary school. They were intact, but the high school section of the building burned. So that was, you know again, the Board of Education wanted to send us back to Tuskegee Institute High School, and Fred Gray and his team went back to court and filed a motion with the court to either um, let us, the Board of Education, make arrangements for us to have class elsewhere at the school, or um, send us to shorter high school where the other six of us, our group, six plaintiffs were. And this at this point, I did go to court with my mother that at that time also, and I remember um, walking into the courtroom, and it was Judge Johnson, but he wasn't alone. It was a three-judge panel at this time, and I remember there was I remember their nameplates, seeing looking at their nameplates. So it was a Judge uh, Reeves. I remember his name because he was as vocal and as Judge Johnson was. They did a lot of discussion. The third judge, I don't know, his name was Judge Harlan or Grooms, or he didn't talk as much as they did. But I do know that the determination, the ruling that they made was that the six of us would go back to the school and have classes um, in in the auditorium. So that's what we did. Shirley and I had our classes in the dressing room off on the side of the stage, and um, they Patty um, joined the three seniors, and they had class in the auditorium itself. Um, at this point, I do remember that our teacher, our eighth grade teacher, admitted that she had increased um, the curriculum that she was teaching us, and that the studies that she was giving us, the assignments that she was giving us, were from the Auburn University freshman class curriculum, which I thought, oh, wow. I knew that she was putting it on us, but I didn't know that she was giving us um, college level material. Unbeknownst to her, she was just preparing us and giving us a better education. But we hung in there. Um, we went on um, to finish that school year. Um, I do know that Fred Gray and his team had gone back to court um, because the Board of Education, the court had ordered the Board of Education to present a plan for further desegregation on coming years. And I remember my mother talking about the fact that the Board of Education had proposed in the desegregating by um, one class each year, starting with the seniors. And I remember my mother saying, well, that doesn't make sense because they want to start with seniors who are going out, and that would delay desegregation of the entire school system. So that was one of the things that I know that was being presented at the court. Um, so after graduation, which the three seniors, Anthony Lee and Robert Junkins and Willie B. Wyatt, who were the seniors, graduated. Unfortunately, they didn't have a major graduation ceremony with their parents and friends and relatives there because of the many threats that Mr. Clements, the principal, had been receiving. And he was afraid that for what may happen if they waited until the scheduled graduation day. So the one Thursday before the last day of school, he had a small graduating ceremony for the three of them. So that was the last day of school. Um, and then um, I the court, Judge Johnson and the court um, ruled against the Board of Education and their plan for desegregating one one class at a time, and ruled that all classes would be desegregated the following year. So the following year, I returned to Tuskegee High School, but this time many of the white students had returned. Um, not all, but many of the white students had returned, and George Wallace and the parents, a lot of white parents in the community had already established the Macon County Academy private school, which was established with a lot of the state funds. So there was still a large population of white students who were attending Macon Academy, which was across the street from Tuskegee High School. But a lot of white students had returned to the school. And so, yes, things change, even just from that perspective, after being sole students in school for a whole year. Now there was beginning to be a semblance of real school. Um, we were still um, we were still segregated in the schools, but we did mingle and talk. And one of the times that we really had an opportunity to share. Well, no, it really was. They were very curious. We would be. It was when we had library time, and so we were sitting around the tables, and they would ask questions. So they would ask questions like, "So, can I touch your hair?" Uh, and I'm like, "Yeah." And so, and this was a young lady, and she touched my hand. But the guys were the ones that were really curious. But a few of them would touch my hand, like, "Oh my gosh, it's soft." Like, well, what did you expect? And
Yeah.
they would share stories like that. My parents told us that your hair was hard like wire, like steel wool, and and things like that. And one of the young men said, I really didn't want to leave the school, in the first place, but my my parents were scared, were afraid that what would happen to our family if we didn't.
Ms. Slocum,
And
let me ask you this question. We've only got a few minutes left. Uh, what, in retrospect, do you feel was your parents and yourself your greatest sacrifice to have accomplished what you did? What did they sacrifice, and what did you feel like you had to sacrifice in order for uh, this change to take place? And thank you so much for this interview. This has been amazing, and you've been very forthcoming with information, and we definitely want to continue this relationship and this discussion. But let's talk a little bit about the sacrifice, and we'll wrap it up.
okay, I think the greatest sacrifice and was just sacrifice of personal time for me. I don't For my parents, I can't say that I saw that they made a sacrifice, because it was already a way of life. They were already determined, from a civil rights standpoint, that this was what they worked on outside of their employment. This is what they worked on. So I didn't see that as a sacrifice for them. But for myself, it was a change. I sacrificed a lot of my social life. I didn't sacrifice all of it, but a lot of things, like um, I was isolated. I felt kind of isolated sometimes, because of the fact that it was just six of us or 12 of us, and primarily more when we were split and it was just six of us. But sacrifice being participating, we did still go to um, basketball games and things like that at Tuskegee Institute High, but to be a part of the band, um, and things like that. That was I sacrificed. That was a sacrifice that I made.
You are an amazing person. You have a amazing story. I'm from Tuskegee, was born and raised there, and I did not know the events that took place in Notasoga. And that's something that we definitely need to talk about. So I'm a college professor, and I'm in a classroom now, and my classroom is filling up with students. Uh, what advice would you give to young people based on your experience about how to address the issues that they face in their time?
um, I think the greatest advice that I could give is that they must always be uh, seek to learn more about where they came from, like we're talking about now, the sacrifices that people made to get them where they are now, but they also need to uh, seek information, seek information from in the right places. In this day and time, with don't trust AI. You're not going to always get the full story, the complete story. Don't stop with one source, but check around. Um, we have to help each other. We have to believe in each other, and the only way that we as a people and we as a society uh, can uh, can can move and make a positive impact is to trust each other and to work together. That's how it worked back in the 50s and the 60s. It's because my parents uh, and your parents and your grandparents, we worked together. Um, we we did what was necessary, but we did it in a way. It was done in a way that it was peaceful, not violent. Keep keep your head on right. Um, make the right decisions. Educate yourself on what's happening in the society. Educate. Vote. Voting is very important. It bothers me to hear young people say, what good does it make for me to vote? It makes a lot of difference, but you have to educate yourself on who the candidates are, what their platform really is, and how it's going to benefit you, how it's going to benefit your family, and how it's going to benefit us as a people.
Thank you so much for this time. You are an angel to us, and we definitely want to invite you down to speak in person. We want to thank the Frank M. Johnson Institute for facilitating this interview, and we will forever remain uh, uh, vigilant and loyal and thankful to you and to your colleagues and to the plaintiffs and to your parents for the contribution that they've made. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
And I echo all of that. That was absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Dr. White, for facilitating this great interview. Thank you, Ms. Slocum. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is wonderful. And I will look forward to talking to you both again soon and seeing you next month.
Thank you. Looking forward to seeing you. And I hope to see you, Bobby.
Yes, ma'am. Real soon. I'll be calling you real soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Bye-bye.
Bye.